I'm a 22-year-old woman, and for most of my life, I believed my mother didn't really love me. I thought she was distant, uninterested, and selfish. But I've come to realize that almost everything I believed about her was a lie, fed to me carefully, piece by someone I trusted more than almost anyone else. My parents divorced when I was 5. The split itself was messy, though I barely remember it. What I do remember is my dad remarrying a year later. Her name was Veronica, and she moved into our house like she had always belonged there. She was younger than my mom, more stylish, and knew how to talk to kids in a way that made me feel important. At first, I thought she was amazing. She'd take me to the movies, let me eat junk food at night, buy me things just because. She laughed at my jokes and let me skip bedtime for game nights. I told my mom about the fun things I did at my dad's house, and she'd just give me a tired smile. Slowly, Veronica started slipping in little comments. She never spoke badly about my mom directly, at least not at first. She'd say things like, "Your mom's a little uptight, isn't she?" Or "She probably called because she's feeling guilty." When my mom would call to talk to me, Veronica would sometimes whisper, "You don't have to talk if you don't feel like it," or she'd roll her eyes in front of me. I started answering with shorter replies. Sometimes I didn't answer at all. My dad never stopped this. If anything, he played along in his own way. If my mom asked for an extra day to see me, he'd say it wasn't a good time. He never yelled or said anything cruel, but he never corrected Veronica either. And that made it easy for me to start believing that maybe they were right. Maybe my mom really was the problem. When I was 8, we moved houses. Veronica said it was for better schools, but I never saw much difference. I only realized years later that my mom never had the new address. I stopped getting birthday cards from her. I assumed she just didn't care enough to send them anymore. Veronica said things like she probably forgot again, with a little sigh. I believed her. As I got older, Veronica's stories about my mom became darker. She told me my mom barely showed up for court during the custody battle, that she didn't try very hard to keep me, that she was unreliable and emotional and gave up easily. At 10 years old, I told my mom I didn't want to visit anymore. She cried and begged me to think about it. I told her to stop being dramatic. I still remember Veronica hugging me afterward and saying, "You're so brave for standing up for yourself." From then on, every holiday was spent with my dad's side. Veronica always had an excuse about why I couldn't split time. She said it would be too much driving, too stressful for me. You don't want to ruin Christmas by having to go back and forth, do you? I didn't. So I stayed. My mom stopped trying as hard. Her calls became less frequent. She didn't show up to things anymore. I thought that confirmed everything. If she really wanted to be in my life, wouldn't she try harder? Wouldn't she fight? By the time I was 13, I was the one picking fights with her. If we did talk or meet, I'd say things that made her flinch. I accused her of not caring, of leaving me behind. She'd sit there quietly and sometimes cry. I used to think it was pathetic. I was a teenager with a chip on my shoulder, and Veronica made me feel like I was the adult in the room. Therapy came into the picture around that time. It was mostly my mom's idea, but my dad agreed because it might help with communication. I sat through the sessions and said what I thought I was supposed to say, that I was angry, that I felt abandoned, that I just didn't connect with her anymore. None of it helped. I was too convinced that I already knew the truth. When I was 19, I left for college out of state. I chose a school far away, not for any specific reason, just to be on my own. That's what I told myself anyway. My dad and Veronica helped me move in. My mom offered to come, but I told her it wasn't necessary. She didn't push it. College gave me space, and in that space, something strange started to happen. I met people who had complicated families too, but they told different kinds of stories. Stories where both parents had tried, where someone had lied or twisted facts. And for the first time, I started wondering. I thought about how one-sided my own memories were. How so much of what I believed came not from what I saw, but from what I had been told. It wasn't like a light bulb moment. It was more like a slow, unsettling unraveling, a creeping doubt. I ignored it for a while. Then one day during sophomore year, I got an email from my mom. She just wrote, "I know you don't owe me anything, but if you ever want to talk, I'll be here. Always." I hadn't heard from her in 8 months. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't reply right away, but that one sentence stuck with me. It sounded nothing like the woman Veronica had spent years describing. And for the first time, I wanted to find out for myself who my mother really was. That's when everything started to change. That's when the cracks in Veronica's carefully built story began to show. I came home for spring break during my second year of college, mostly out of habit. I had no real plans other than to sleep, avoid emails, and maybe catch up with a few friends. The week before my flight, I got an email from my mom. It had no subject, just one short line. "If you're open to it, I'd really like to see you." I hadn't spoken to her in 8 months. The last time we talked, I had snapped at her over something small and then ignored every message she sent after. But this time, something pulled at me. I replied. I said I'd have an afternoon free during break and we could meet for lunch. She picked a diner near the airport. I said fine. She was already sitting at a booth when I walked in. She stood up, gave me an awkward smile, then sat back down. She looked different than I remembered, more tired, but not broken. Just worn down in the way people get when they've held their breath for years. We didn't talk much while we ordered. She asked about school. I gave short answers. Then without warning, she reached into her bag and placed a small wooden box on the table between us. She pushed it toward me and said, "Read them when you're ready." I opened it slightly. Inside were dozens of letters, bundled by ribbon, each envelope addressed in her handwriting to me. She paid the bill before I could say anything. I took the box back to my dorm, put it on my desk, and didn't touch it for 3 days. When I finally opened it, I didn't know what to expect. I pulled out the first letter. It was dated 2 months after my 7th birthday. The handwriting was neat, the ink slightly faded. It talked about my favorite cartoons, the new piano book I had, how proud she was that I got through my dentist appointment without crying. The second letter mentioned a drawing I had sent her. I had no memory of sending it. The third talked about how she tried to call but couldn't reach me. Each letter was personal, detailed, and heartbreakingly normal. There were no guilt trips, no pleading, just simple love and a quiet hope that I might read them someday. Some envelopes were stamped with big red ink, recipient moved. No forwarding address. Others had yellow stickers, address unknown. I sat there for hours, reading through them. My heart didn't break in one dramatic moment. It chipped slowly, with every envelope. Veronica had told me we moved for better schools. But my mom had been writing, she just didn't know where to send them. The next morning, I called my mom. I didn't know what to say. When she picked up, I just started crying. She didn't ask for explanations. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just stayed on the phone until I could breathe again. I told her I was sorry. She told me I didn't need to be. Over the next few weeks, we started talking more regularly. Her tone never changed. She never brought up my dad or Veronica unless I did. And even then, she stayed neutral. She answered questions directly, never tried to sway me or turn me against them. I began to remember things that didn't sit right. I remembered the year I didn't get a birthday card. Veronica told me my mom probably forgot. But one of the letters in that box was a birthday card with a printed receipt that showed it had been sent, just never delivered. I remembered Veronica saying my mom never showed up to my piano recital, but one of the letters mentioned the exact date and time and how much she wished she could be there. I decided to test something. I called my dad and asked if he remembered the move we made after second grade. He said, "Yeah, your stepmom handled most of that stuff. She took care of the school forms and the address change." I asked if they ever got letters from my mom around that time. He paused and said, "She said they stopped coming." I didn't push it further. I thanked him and hung up, but that was all I needed to hear. Veronica hadn't just poisoned my view of my mother, she'd made sure there was no way for the truth to get through. No letters, no phone calls, no visits. That night, I pulled out a notebook and began writing everything I could remember. Not just the obvious things, the twisted stories, the lies, but the smaller details, the patterns. How I was always made to believe my mom didn't try. How every memory I had of her was interrupted or redefined by something Veronica told me. I didn't know what I was going to do with any of it. I wasn't planning some dramatic confrontation or explosion. I just needed to get it all out where I could see it. Because the truth had been kept from me for too long, and now that I had it in pieces, I needed to start putting it together. I sent my mom a photo of the letters spread out across my bed. She replied, "I'm glad you have them now." That was all. No more, no less. But for me, that box had changed everything. And I knew this was only the beginning. I flew home for the summer and stayed at my mom's place, something I hadn't done since I was a little girl. I expected it to feel awkward, like visiting a stranger, but it didn't. Her house looked nothing like the version Veronica had described for years. It wasn't gloomy or chaotic. It was full of light, old books, houseplants, and framed photos of moments I barely remembered. Everything had a place. There were drawings of mine from elementary school still taped inside the pantry door. The second morning I was there, I asked if she had any more records, anything that could help me piece together what really happened. She looked unsure but brought down a file folder from a high shelf in her closet. It was thick, held shut with a rubber band. Inside were copies of letters she'd sent, most of them stamped return to sender. She had screenshots of emails she'd sent to my school's generic address and read receipts from automated replies. There were also handwritten notes from a custody mediator dated between when I was 7 and 10. My mom had filed for partial custody twice. I had been told she never even showed up. I logged into my old school account using a password I still remembered from middle school and checked the records section. Our mailing address had changed 3 times in 4 years, all updated by my father's household. My mom's name wasn't listed as an emergency contact on any of them. Not once. I visited my old elementary school. It took some convincing, but I managed to get a printed copy of one of our second grade class photos. On the back was a sticky note in different handwriting. It read, "Tell her I'll call tonight, Mom." I had never seen that note before. I tracked down my old friend Lucy, whose mother used to babysit me before and after school. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but she still lived nearby. When I asked about those years, she didn't hesitate. "Your mom used to try and come to your recitals. Veronica said it made you anxious and asked my mom to block her from the room." That was the final push I needed. I started scanning everything: letters, stamped envelopes, legal documents, emails, photos. I organized them by date and attached metadata when possible. I created a folder on my laptop named Truth. I didn't want to yell at Veronica or send her an email she could ignore. I wanted her lies to collapse in front of people she couldn't manipulate. 2 weeks later, my dad's 50th birthday was being celebrated at a rented lodge 2 hours outside the city. More than 30 relatives were invited. My dad loved surprises, so I told him I wanted to make a tribute slideshow. He was excited. I asked everyone for pictures from over the years: childhood, holidays, graduations. Most relatives were happy to send what they had. I spent 3 days building the slideshow. It started with happy moments, photos of my dad holding me at birth, our first snowman, him teaching me how to ride a bike. The middle section shifted. Images of returned letters faded in over piano recital photos. Copies of court filings appeared beside birthday cards stamped undeliverable. I didn't include commentary. I recorded a voiceover that explained each document in a calm, matter-of-fact tone. This is a copy of the custody request filed in April 2009. This is the class photo where my mom's note was removed. This is a receipt showing a package sent to me that was never delivered. No emotion, just evidence. The party was loud and cheerful. People passed around drinks, took pictures near a photo backdrop, and helped themselves to food trays on rented wooden tables. My dad hugged everyone at least twice. When it came time for the slideshow, we gathered in the main hall. My dad stood near the front, arm around Veronica. At first, everyone smiled. Childhood photos brought out laughter and comments. Then the tone shifted. Letters appeared on the screen, court documents, school records. The room fell silent. Veronica's smile dropped. She tried to speak over the video, but the voiceover kept playing. This is what I thought was true. This is what was actually true. Someone near the back whispered, "Wait, what?" My dad didn't say anything. He just stared. Veronica reached for the remote, but one of my cousins held it out of reach. The slideshow played through to the final slide, a screenshot of the returned emails with the school district's header. I stood up and said, "Every piece of this has been verified. If anyone wants copies, I brought extras." The room didn't explode in chaos like I expected. There was just stunned silence. Some people looked at Veronica. Others looked at my dad. A few looked away entirely. Veronica tried to laugh. She said something about manipulated memories and teenage misunderstandings. Nobody responded. One of my uncles asked if the court records were real. I handed him the copies. He read the header and didn't say another word. My mom wasn't at the party. She didn't want to come. She didn't need to. For the first time in years, her side of the story had been seen, clearly publicly, and without her having to beg anyone to believe it. Veronica stood frozen for a moment, then walked out. My dad didn't follow her. The music stayed off. No one clapped. A few people came over to hug me. Some asked for the link to the slideshow. Others sat in silence, still processing. The next day, everything started to unravel. The silence after the slideshow ended was louder than any argument could have been. It hung in the air like someone had just said something unforgivable but completely true. No one moved. Then, finally, my Aunt Carla, who rarely holds back, broke it with a sharp, "What the hell was that?" My father was still standing at the front of the room, staring at the blank screen. He looked like someone had punched all the air out of him. Veronica turned bright red and gave this awkward laugh, like she thought if she could lighten the mood, the entire thing would vanish. It didn't. I stood up and said clearly that everything shown in the video was real. I told them the letters were authentic, the court records were legitimate, and I had hard copies if anyone wanted to see them. One of my cousins, Madison, who works as a paralegal, raised her hand like she was in a classroom and asked if she could look at the court filings again. I handed her the folder. Veronica walked over to where a few people were gathered and suddenly changed her approach. She said my mom must have forged everything, that she never saw any letters, and this was just a scheme to win me back because my mom was jealous of how close we all were. Someone asked her why she never mentioned any of this before. Veronica said I was being manipulated and didn't know the full story. I pulled out my phone and showed Madison the scanned letters with metadata, timestamps, and photo evidence of envelopes postmarked and returned. I also had a notarized affidavit from the mediator who oversaw my mom's custody hearings. It listed dates, attendance logs, and summaries of discussions. My mom had been there every time. My father never replied to the requests for mediation. My father asked me to talk to him privately. I agreed, but only if Veronica stayed behind. We stepped into a small room off the side of the main hall. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He said Veronica was probably just trying to keep things peaceful when she chose not to pass along the letters. I asked why that version of peace required cutting my mom completely out of my life. He didn't answer. I told him Veronica may have orchestrated it, but he let it happen. He admitted he never read the letters. Veronica told him I didn't want them. That I said they made me uncomfortable. I said, "You let someone else define my entire childhood for me." His mouth opened like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. While we were in that side room, Veronica was working the party like a politician in crisis mode. She walked from one relative to another, giving her version of events. But the responses weren't what she expected. My Uncle Andrew asked why she never showed them any of this evidence if it was all fake. My Aunt Carla asked her point blank whether she ever blocked my mom's number or threw out letters. Veronica claimed she didn't remember doing any of that. Then my younger cousin Nora, who was maybe 12 when Veronica used to babysit her, asked the question that really cut through everything. "Yeah, you used to tell me her mom just gave up. Did you lie to me too?" Veronica had no response. She turned around, walked to the far corner of the room, and sat down alone. By the time I walked back in, the energy had shifted. People weren't angry, they were uncomfortable. No one sat near Veronica. Some stared at their drinks. Some whispered. A few were already slipping out the back, pretending they had to leave early. I passed by the cake table, where one of my cousins had cut pieces for guests, but barely any had been touched. My father walked in behind me a few minutes later and didn't go to her. He stood near my Aunt Carla instead. A few people approached me quietly. One told me they always thought it was strange that my mom just vanished from family events. Another admitted they believed what Veronica told them because they didn't think anyone would go that far to lie. Madison handed me the documents back and said, "None of this is fake. These would hold up in court." Veronica eventually got up and walked out of the party without saying a word. She didn't even glance at my father. He watched her go, but didn't follow. I didn't either. No one did. When the party wound down, the relatives who stayed came up and hugged me. Some apologized. Some didn't have the words. I didn't need them to. The slideshow had already said everything I wanted to say. The fallout had started, and I could tell this wasn't going to stop with just one party. The morning after the party, I woke up to a string of messages from cousins and old family friends. They were all screenshots. Veronica had made a long Facebook post around midnight. She claimed she was being smeared by a child who doesn't understand the past and influenced by a woman who was never fit to be a mother. She didn't name me or my mom directly, but there was no mistaking who she meant. Then without warning, she blocked me before I could even see the post myself. In the post, she accused my mother of being mentally unstable, of abandoning me during her emotional spirals, and suggested that my mom had filled my head with lies to turn me against her. She ended the post with a passive-aggressive line about some people needing therapy, not an audience. Aunt Carla commented on the post, asking for proof of any of it. The comment was deleted within minutes. After that, Veronica went quiet publicly, but she began messaging family members privately. Long, rambling messages, some more than a dozen paragraphs, about how I had always been emotionally fragile, and that she had protected me from my mother's instability. She said I was attention-seeking and being used in an old custody grudge. Every message ended with a plea not to judge her until they had heard her side. Several relatives sent me screenshots. One cousin told me she messaged their mom at 2 a.m., claiming I was spiraling and destroying the family out of bitterness. Another said Veronica implied my mom had once tried to take me without permission from school, which never happened. I didn't respond to any of it. I didn't post anything. I didn't reach out to defend myself. Instead, I started documenting everything: screenshots, timestamps, message logs. I saved them all in the folder I had labeled Truth. My mom stayed quiet too, but she suggested something I hadn't thought of. She told me to try reaching out to the custody mediator who had handled her court filings years ago. We weren't sure the woman was still in the same line of work, but we found her. She remembered my mom. After a phone call and some confirmation documents, she agreed to write a formal statement outlining my mom's efforts during the custody process. It included exact court dates, filing attempts, and summaries of what happened each time. My mom had never missed a single court date. Veronica's name didn't appear on any of the forms. I emailed the statement privately to relatives who still seemed on the fence. A few of them hadn't responded to the slideshow or the documents I shared at the party. Most replied with short messages thanking me. Some asked to be kept out of it. No one defended Veronica. That same week, Veronica showed up at my father's office without warning. She told his coworkers that I was harassing her and had ambushed her in front of family to make her look bad. Someone who worked at the office texted my dad immediately. When he found out, he was furious. He called me from the parking lot of his workplace and said, "I'm beginning to see who she really is." I told him I wasn't doing any of this out of revenge. I wasn't trying to ruin her. I just didn't want the truth buried anymore. That was all I wanted. Truth, in the open, without manipulation or hiding. Later that week, Veronica called my mother. She didn't pick up. She sent one text in response: "You forfeited the right to talk to me years ago." Then she blocked her. There was no further contact after that. The fallout didn't stop there. I started getting messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years: old classmates, neighbors, parents of friends I used to play with. One of them said, "She told me your mom was in jail when you were little." Another remembered Veronica claiming my mom had moved away and wanted nothing to do with me. None of them had believed it fully at the time, but no one thought to ask. I compiled every story into a timeline. I listed dates, quotes, screenshots, receipts, and names with permission. It wasn't something I ever planned to release publicly, but I wanted it in one place. If anyone ever asked me again what really happened, I wouldn't have to explain. I could just hand it over. I didn't post it anywhere. I didn't send it to everyone, but I made it available for anyone who was confused or still believed Veronica's version of events. Most didn't ask. The people who mattered already knew. Veronica's spin campaign didn't change anything. If anything, it only made more people skeptical of her. The more she tried to control the story, the more obvious it became that she'd been doing it for years. She couldn't erase the slideshow. She couldn't erase the documents. And for the first time since I was a child, she couldn't erase my mother. A week after the Facebook meltdown and the family tension that followed, my father reached out asking to meet for lunch, just the two of us. We met at a small cafe halfway between his office and where I was staying. He looked exhausted. There were bags under his eyes, his shirt was wrinkled, and he kept glancing around like he was expecting someone to overhear. He told me he had confronted Veronica the night of the party, after everyone had left. At first, she denied everything. When he pressed, she admitted parts of it, but then turned it back on him. She said he was the one who failed by letting things get this far, by not managing me better, by not protecting her from the ambush. According to him, she accused him of siding with the enemy. He said, "I think I've been a coward for a long time." I didn't say anything. He asked me if I wanted him to divorce her. I told him that decision wasn't mine to make, but I made it clear I wouldn't have any contact with her again. No holidays, no shared visits, no joint calls. He said he was thinking about separating. He just needed time. I told him I wasn't waiting on anyone anymore. That same week, I reconnected with my childhood piano teacher, Miss Harrington. I hadn't seen her in over 10 years, but I remembered how kind she had been. I reached out through her studio's website and asked if we could meet. When I explained why, she didn't hesitate. She remembered a specific recital from when I was 9. My mom had shown up early and waited outside the venue, holding a small bouquet. Veronica approached her before the show started and told her it would be too upsetting for me if she came in. Miss Harrington confirmed that my mom never even stepped inside. She had taken a photo that day of my mom waiting by the car, holding the flowers. She gave me a copy. I added that photo to the timeline file I had been building. I labeled it with the date, recital program, and Miss Harrington's statement. It was just one more piece in a long chain of evidence showing how deeply Veronica went to rewrite history. My father texted later that week asking if I would let him see the full document. I sent it to him that night. He responded the next day with a voice message. I listened to it in my car outside a coffee shop. He cried the entire time. No explanation, no excuses. Just him repeating, "I had no idea how much I lost," over and over again. A few days after that, Veronica showed up at my mom's house. She knocked on the door and refused to leave. My mom didn't open it. She called the police, reported trespassing, and had them come by. The officer spoke to Veronica and gave her a formal warning. They told her not to return. My mom blocked her number that same night. There was no more contact. Veronica didn't take it well. That night, she sent a mass text to several relatives claiming my mom and I were plotting to destroy her life. She said we were turning the family against her, spreading lies, and creating emotional damage that can't be undone. This time, no one took the bait. A few people ignored it entirely. One uncle replied, "Nobody needed to plot. You did that yourself." 2 days later, my father moved out of the house. He checked into a small hotel on the edge of town and texted me a photo of the keycard sitting on the nightstand. The message just said, "I'm trying." He didn't say where Veronica was, and I didn't ask. I told my mom that same evening. She was standing in the kitchen making tea when I mentioned it. She didn't say anything at first. Then, without a trace of bitterness, she smiled. Not the tight kind of smile I had grown used to from her. A real one. One I hadn't seen in a long time. I stayed with her for the rest of the summer. We didn't talk about the past every day. Okay. Sometimes we just watched movies or went for walks. She never asked for updates about my father. She never once told me what to do next. It was the first time in my life that I felt like I had room to choose without someone tugging the strings behind me. Veronica didn't reach out again. She didn't message me, didn't call, didn't try to fix anything. She was blocked on every platform and phone number. So was I. Whatever noise she had been making had finally gone quiet. The damage she caused was still real, but so was the fact that she no longer had control over any of us. And for the first time since I was 6 years old, it felt like the story was mine to tell. My father never went back home. After 3 weeks at the hotel, he found a short-term apartment on the other side of town and moved in. It was small, with mismatched furniture and paint that didn't quite match in the corners, but it was his. He didn't tell Veronica he'd moved out officially, he just stayed gone. During that time we talked. Not about Veronica. About everything else. He admitted to years of silence. He had seen things that didn't sit right, but said nothing, because life with Veronica was easier when he didn't question her. He avoided conflict, even when it came at the cost of clarity. He knew things didn't add up, especially when I stopped asking about my mom, but he didn't press. Every time he thought to ask, Veronica had an answer ready. He said it was easier to believe her than to deal with what pushing back might bring. I asked if he still spoke to her. He said she called him once after he moved out. She cried, promised to fix everything, blamed me for poisoning the family, and said we were making her look unstable. He blocked her number the same day. There's been no contact since. Veronica didn't stop though. She invited some of our more distant relatives, people who hadn't been at the party, hadn't seen the documents, and hadn't been involved in any of the drama, to a lunch she called a chance to clear the air. She tried to frame it as a family gathering to set the record straight. One of my cousins got invited and messaged me asking if I planned on going. I told her no, but I sent her the full document, the scanned letters, the court records, the timeline, the witness statements. I gave her permission to share it with anyone attending who wanted to know why I wouldn't be there. The lunch was a disaster. Veronica came in dressed like she was hosting a brunch fundraiser and started with a speech about misunderstandings, family loyalty, and the dangers of one-sided stories. But the mood shifted quickly. The questions started small. Why hadn't she responded to the court filings? Why had she said my mom abandoned me when there were letters and proof otherwise? According to my cousin, the room got colder with each question. Some relatives excused themselves halfway through. One of them quietly slid the printed timeline across the table and said, "You left a lot out." Veronica left early, claiming she had a migraine. No one followed her out. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't need anyone to grovel or apologize. I just wanted the truth to live somewhere outside of me. That was enough. That summer, my mom and I rebuilt things slowly. There was no pressure. We started cooking dinner together once a week. She showed me old photos I had never seen. Me in a Halloween costume she helped sew. US at a local fair when I was 5, her smiling behind me at a school open house. Some photos I had been told she never attended. She never once asked me to cut my father off. She made it clear that my relationship with him was mine to decide. One night, she said, "You spent so long without a real choice. I just want you to feel free to make one now." I asked her if she still hated Veronica. She smiled without a hint of sarcasm and said, "I used to. But now I just pity her." In August, my dad formally filed for divorce. He didn't ask for anything but the car he drove and the art tools he kept in the garage. He didn't want the house, the furniture, or any kind of alimony. The filing was simple. No arguments, no conditions. I didn't attend the court date, but my father called afterward. He said Veronica tried to claim emotional distress and defamation. The judge asked for evidence. She didn't have any. The filing was dismissed without delays. Divorce granted. About a month later, my mom asked if I wanted to help her go through the attic. There were boxes she hadn't opened in years. We found old drawings I made in preschool, photos of me asleep on her chest, a report card I had given her in 2nd grade with a smiley face sticker on it. At the bottom of one box was a sealed envelope. On the front was my name in her handwriting and the words "for your 13th birthday." She never got to give it to me. I sat on the floor of her attic and read the card out loud. It talked about how proud she was of me, how much she missed hearing my voice, how she hoped I never forgot I was loved. When I finished, I hugged her and cried. She didn't say anything. She just held me and let me sit there until I was ready to get up. Not everything was fixed. There were still gaps. Some memories would always be tangled. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't trapped in someone else's version of the past, and that was enough.